Hi, this is Katie from Katie and the Squid. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make the Hikari Shawl. The shawl pattern is available for free on my website, so I'll link to where you can find that. You can also purchase a PDF from either Ravelry or Etsy if you like to print your patterns or if you just like to have them in PDF form. So this shawl is a really easy shawl to make. It's just a 2-row repeat, and since it's just a 2-row repeat, it's really easy to adjust the size if you'd like. For my shawl, I used Finesse Cotton Silk DK from King Cole, and I used 7 skeins of this yarn, and the colorway that I'm using is called Antique Lilac. So 7 skeins gave me the size of shawl that I made, but it's really easy to adjust the size if you'd like. You could probably go down to 5 or 6 for a slightly smaller shawl, and you could probably go up to about 10 or 12 if you wanted a really nice big shawl. So it's really easy to adjust the size if you'd like. I will add a link to a King Cole stockist finder so you can find a store that stocks King Cole yarn. And then for a hook, I used a H or a 5mm hook. Gauge isn't super important for this project, but we will do a gauge check after a certain amount of rows. So there's no gauge swatch. All you do is you start the shawl, and then after a certain amount of rows, we'll do a gauge check. So make sure that you have a ruler handy. And then this is optional. I used a Tassel Maker to make the tassels on my shawl. This one is from Clover. I'll link to where you can find this Tassel Maker, but you don't need this. You could use a piece of cardboard to make your tassels. There's lots of videos out there that show you how to make tassels, so if you need help doing that, be sure to look that up. So before you begin your shawl, you'll want to make your tassels first, especially if you're adjusting the size of your shawl, because you want to make sure that you have enough yarn at the end of your shawl to make your tassels. So I recommend making the tassels first. So my tassels are 3.5 inches long. So for the Tassel Maker that I used, that is the middle size. This is where I have it set to make the 3.5 inch tassels. So once you have those made, you can go ahead and set those aside. You'll attach those at the end. So this shawl begins at the very bottom tip of the shawl, and then what we're doing is we're increasing at the beginning and end of every row. So that's what creates the triangle shape of this shawl. To begin, you're going to chain 4. Then you're going to work 1 double crochet into the 4th chain from your hook. And you'll have something that looks like that. For row 2, you're going to chain 1, and of course you'll turn. Then we're going to work a series of stitches into this space. So just into the space between the 3 chains and the double crochet. So we're going to single crochet, chain 2, and then we're going to work one of our special stitches, which is a cluster. So for the cluster stitch, it's really important to kind of keep your yarn overs fairly loose, because that'll make it easier for you to draw your hook through all the loops. So what we're going to do is we're going to yarn over, insert our hook into that space, pull up a loop, and then we're going to repeat that 3 times. So yarn over, insert your hook, pull up a loop, that's 2. And as you're doing it, you want to pull up a little bit of space so that your hook can easily go through all those loops at the end. So we'll yarn over and then pull up a loop for the last time, that's the 3rd time. And then we'll yarn over, and we're going to pull through all the loops on our hook. And because I made it nice and loose, it went through pretty easy. Next, you're going to chain 2, and then we're still working into that same space. We're going to single crochet. For row 3, you're going to chain 3, and this will count as a double crochet. Next, you're going to work 2 double crochets into that first single crochet. Then we're going to work our next special stitch, which is a crossed double crochet. So for this stitch, this is always going to go into the chain 2 spaces on either side of the cluster stitch. So you're going to skip the first chain 2 space, and you're going to work a double crochet into the next chain 2 space. So there I have a double crochet. Then what you're going to do is you're going to work a double crochet into the first space that you skipped. So I'll yarn over, and you're going to work coming from the front. So we're going to insert our hook from the front, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then yarn over, pull through 2. And so what it does is those 2 double crochets cross. So the second double crochet is worked over the first one, so it kind of goes like around it. And then we're going to work 3 double crochets into the last single crochet. And that's what it looks like after row 3. So for row 4, you're going to chain 1 and turn. And this first set of stitches is going to go into the space between the first and second double crochet. So we're going to single crochet, chain 2, and then we're going to work that cluster again. So yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. And see, they're nice and loose there, so I can easily pull that last loop through all of those loops. And then you're going to chain 2. Next, you're going to single crochet into the next double crochet. Be sure to skip this double crochet and work your single crochet into the next one. Next, you're going to chain 2. And then we're going to work another cluster, and that cluster is going to go into this space between the crossed double crochet. So in between the 2 double crochets of that crossed double crochet. So you yarn over, and I'm going to insert my hook into that space. Again, pull up your loops nice and loose, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull up a loop. And then you'll yarn over and pull through all loops. Then you'll chain 2, single crochet into that next double crochet, chain 2, and then we're going to work that same increase that we started with, but we're going to work it into the space between the last double crochet and that chain 3. So we're going to work a cluster, and we're going to work into that space. So yarn over, pull up a loop, 2, 3, and then we'll chain 2, and you'll single crochet into that same space. So here's what we look like after row 4. So next we're going to work row 5 and then 6, and those will be the same rows that you work throughout the shawl. So as you can see, we're increasing at the beginning and end of each row. And 5 and 6 will work similarly. So for row 5, we're going to chain 3, and then you'll work 2 double crochets into that first single crochet, so this group of 3 double crochets, that's our increase at the beginning of the row. Next we're going to work our crossed double crochet, and again it's going to go on either side of this cluster stitch. So I'll double crochet into the second chain 2 space, and then I'll go back and I'll double crochet into that first one, working over the first double crochet. Next, you're going to double crochet into the next single crochet. And then that's your repeat all the way across. So I'm going to work a crossed double crochet here. So the crossed double crochet is always going to go on either side of, it's always going to go into the chain 2 spaces on either side of the cluster stitch. So that's an easy way to remember where those go. And then double crochet into the single crochet. And then crossed on either side of the cluster stitch. And double crochet into the last single crochet. And then we're going to add 2 more double crochets into this single crochet for that increase at the end. So you'll have a total of 3 double crochets into your last single crochet. And that's the increase at the end. So that is row 5. And you'll repeat that for every odd row from here on. Row 6, you'll chain 1, turn, and again this increase is going to be worked into the space between the first and second double crochet. So you'll single crochet, chain 2, cluster, chain 2, single crochet into this next double crochet, chain 2, cluster in the space between the crossed double crochets, chain 2, single crochet into the next double crochet, and we're repeating that across. So cluster, or chain 2, cluster into the space between the double crochets, the cross double crochets, chain 2, double crochet into the next, or single crochet into the next double crochet, chain 2, cluster between the crossed double crochets, chain 2, and then single crochet into that next double crochet. So you repeat that all the way across the cluster, the chain 2, cluster, chain 2, single crochet, chain 2, until you have 2 double crochets left. So that's a chain 2, and then you're going to work your last increase here into the space between the last double crochet and the chain 3. So we'll cluster into that space, and you can see I made those loops a little bit too tight, so it was harder to get my hook through. So be sure to make those loops nice and loose. Chain 2, and then you'll end with a single crochet in that same space. So that is your repeat of row 6. So at the end of row 6, we're going to do a little gauge check, and gauge isn't really super important for this project because it's really easy to adjust if you need to, but if you want to make sure that you're on the right track to making your shawl the same size as my sample, then you can do a gauge check here. So obviously this isn't blocked, so we're going off a non-blocked gauge. So at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to measure across. So what we're going to do is we're just going to lay our little piece flat here, and I have a rigid ruler which works best, and right now at this point my piece is about 4 inches across. So if you're off by a little bit, it's really not a big deal. But if you're off by a lot, maybe you want to change your hook size. And then just to make sure that your length is correct or about on the same track, right now my piece is about 2.5 inches long. So you can do a gauge check here. If it's not that important to you, then you can just move on. So next what you'll do is you'll repeat rows 5 and 6 until you have a total of 68 rows. And then you'll repeat row 5 one more time, so you're gonna end on a repeat of row 5.